Hello, I'm Maddie Dalrymple, and welcome to From Expertise to Authority, where we examine how you can build your professional presence for a sideline or second act. More resources are available at theindieauthor.com, and that's indie with a Y, including a downloadable worksheet that you can use to document your journey from expertise to authority. In this episode, we'll be exploring the hourglass pattern of authority building, how focused expertise becomes your launchpad to broader reach. If you'd like to read the article this episode is based on, you'll find that at Substack at Maddie Dalrymple. And if you'd like to watch the full interview with Angelique Fawns that this episode is based on, you'll find that on YouTube at Maddie Dalrymple. When people think about building authority, they often think big, broad expertise, wide audiences, maximum reach. But in my experience, and in the stories of the most effective authorities I've encountered, the path to influence looks less like a megaphone and more like an hourglass. You start with a wide base of knowledge and experience, then you narrow your topic relentlessly, focusing your expertise until you occupy a space that is unmistakably yours. And only after you've established yourself in that tight center do you begin to expand again, this time widening not the topic, but the platforms through which you share it, carrying hard won credibility with you as you go. The case for going narrow? Consider the path of Angelique Fawns, a Toronto area writer and journalist who wanted to break into short fiction. She had a journalism degree, nearly 3 decades in commercial production, and a lifelong love of horror and speculative fiction. When a broken ankle left her unable to drive to work, she lives on a farm with a long commute, she finally stopped putting off her writing and dove in, and immediately hit a wall. She says, I wrote tons of short stories and sent them to contests because that's the first thing I found on the internet. I spent $1,000 and didn't make a single sale or earn a single win. That expensive lesson set Angelique searching for a better approach. She found writing groups, discovered the landscape of literary magazines, and started compiling research on markets where writers could submit without paying a fee. The more she researched, the more she realized that no one had assembled a focused, practical resource for writers who wanted to find paying, no-fee markets for short fiction. So she built one herself. Notice the progression. Angelique didn't set out to become an authority on writing in general. She didn't even position herself as an authority on short fiction. She niched down specifically to short fiction markets that pay writers and don't charge submission fees. That's the kind of focus that might seem limiting at first glance, but it's precisely what made her indispensable. Why niching down works? There's a practical logic to going narrow. When you stake a claim in a highly specific territory, you're far more likely to become the go-to resource in that space. Angelique realized a real unmet need. Short fiction writers were wasting time and money navigating a landscape cluttered with pay-to-submit contests and non-paying markets. She became the person who solved that problem. But the benefits go beyond filling a gap. Niching down also forces clarity. When Angelique committed to tracking no-fee paying markets, she had a clear filter for every piece of content she created. Should she include a magazine with a $30 submission fee? No, that's outside her niche. Should she list a market that doesn't pay contributors? No again. That clear boundary made her resource more useful, not less. Niching down also creates a recognizable identity. Angelique's monthly list of submission opportunities became her signature. Organized, deadline-driven tracking that drew on the same production skills she'd honed in her commercial career, now applied to short fiction submissions. That consistent, recognizable format meant people knew exactly what they were getting when they encountered her work. And niching down builds trust through specificity. Anyone can offer vague advice about getting published, but when someone provides a curated, regularly updated list of specific markets organized by pay rate, with notes on what each editor is looking for, that's the kind of detail that earns trust. Angelique supplemented her list by interviewing editors at magazines like Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, asking them directly what made a submission stand out. That combination of curation and original insight is what turned a resource into an authority. The moment you know it's working? Angelique's aha moment came at the Superstars Writing Seminars in Colorado, the first writing conference she'd ever attended. She says, so many people knew me, I had no idea really that anyone was reading my posts. I would put them out in the world, but I had no idea they were attracting followers. People approached her, thanked her for her lists, asked her questions as though she were an authority, which, without fully realizing it, she had become. In fact, the person who builds genuine authority is often the last to recognize it, because they've been focused on being useful rather than on being important. The pivot to expansion. Here's where the bottom half of the hourglass comes in. After establishing authority in a narrow topic, opportunities to expand across platforms start appearing naturally. For Angelique, the narrow focus on no-fee paying markets gave her a foundation from which to grow in multiple directions. She began interviewing editors and publishers, leveraging her journalism background. which added depth to her authority and brought new audiences to her work. She started a horror fiction podcast, Read Me a Nightmare, connecting her market expertise with her creative work. She moved her content to Substack, where the platform's built-in discoverability more than tripled her subscriber base. If she wanted to expand her platform further, she might create a class to teach short fiction writers the best practices for submission to no-fee paying platforms, or even offer consulting services to walk writers through the process. That expansion would have been much harder, maybe impossible, without the credibility she built in her niche. When Angelique expands to a new platform, she carries with her the authority she earned through years of focused, specific, and genuinely useful work. She's not starting from scratch each time. She's extending a reputation that precedes her. How to apply the hourglass to your own path. If you're looking to build authority in an area of your expertise, consider mapping your own hourglass. Start with what you know broadly. Angelique knew writing, journalism, and production. For another professional, that suite of knowledge might be marketing, finance, education, and healthcare. What is it for you? Then narrow that until you find your specific value. What's the intersection of your expertise, your passion, and an underserved need? For Angelique, it was the gap between short fiction writers and accessible paying markets. For you, it might be something equally specific, and that specificity is a feature, not a bug. Build there consistently. Create a resource, a regular publication, or a body of work that people can rely on. Angelique's monthly lists became her calling card, not because they were flashy, but because they were useful and dependable. Then expand across platforms. Once you've established credibility in your niche, you'll start seeing natural pathways outwards. Not necessarily into new topics, but into new formats and channels for sharing the expertise you've already built. The key is that these expansions are grounded in demonstrated authority, not wishful thinking. The hourglass isn't just a strategy for building authority, it's a strategy for building authority that lasts. Anyone can claim broad expertise, but the person who has gone deep in a specific area and then expanded outward carries a kind of credibility that's very hard to replicate. They didn't just announce themselves as an authority, they earned it one narrowly targeted, useful contribution at a time. If you'd like support developing a personalized pathway from expertise to authority for yourself, please check out my consulting service at theindieauthor.com/authority. And if you're an event organizer, I would love to share with your community a framework they can use to develop their own path. And if you'd like to get in touch, just drop me a note at maddie@maddie.com. Thank you for listening.